Okay. Okay, so yeah, in my intro, just my name is Nydia Segura. I am a UI UX designer at CenterPoint Energy. Here's my little bio. So I started in software testing, just really quick bio. Started in software testing, did a pit stop in web development. Now I'm here in the UI UX space. I don't know what will be next for me, but I'm going to be referring to my script over here. So hopefully that's not distracting, that I'm just moving my head a lot. So today I will be talking about accessibility. It's often abbreviated like this. I don't know if y'all have seen it like that. I really don't even know how people say it. It looks like ally, but it's A and then 11Y, because it's the there's 11 letters between the A and the Y, and it's a really long word, and it's hard to spell with all those, L's and I's together. So it's usually abbreviated like this. So I only have 20 minutes to cover this really, really huge topic, and it won't be enough. So I'll be sharing some of the important parts that I think everybody should keep in mind. I feel like accessibility is rarely like listed or emphasized in people's portfolios or LinkedIn, or maybe I just haven't seen it, but it's a really important like knowledge base to have. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about. So when we say the word accessibility, we are referring to, what are we referring to? So I took this definition from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, which is a great resource that we will be linking. So they define it as the quality of the qualities that make an experience open to all, and also the professional discipline that focuses on achieving the first definition. So the statistic time. So who are we benefiting? Like how many people are we talking to? So are talking about? So if we are to change our process a little bit to accommodate a group, like how big is this group? So I'm focusing mostly on data from the US just for this presentation, but this is a global concern, obviously. So about 26% of people in the US have some type of disability, according to the CDC. And these range from like auditory, visual, or cognitive. And it is worth noting that not all disabilities are permanent. So from the Microsoft Design Toolkit, they show this graphic, which shows disabilities as a spectrum. So some are permanent, some are temporary, and some are just based on situation. For example, the disabilities have to do with vision, like they can range from permanent blindness to just recovering from eye surgery, or just having the sun in your eyes on a really bright day and you're trying to use something. And similarly for hearing, a person could be permanently deaf, or just have an ear infection that requires like plugs. Or you could be sitting at a loud coffee shop and you forgot your headphones. So in that scenario, closed captioning on a video would help the entire range of those situations. And so a recent example, this is just to like put things into perspective. So since COVID, like one of the main symptoms is losing your taste and smell. I saw a comment on YouTube that was saying, what if it messed with your hearing and eyesight instead of taste and smell? And so that would be horrible. And so that's how things can be situational, and you should take it into consideration. Okay, so just to give more context and a little bit of history to our topic, I'll begin by defining the social model of disability. And it was born as a response to the medical model of disability, which supposes that a person's disability will reduce their quality of life, and that the disability can be managed or corrected medically. So, any kind of like assisting like devices, glasses, wheelchair. So this places the responsibility on the individual to basically take care of the problem. And so the social model was born from that, and it has a different approach, which says that a person, sorry, what happened?
You're good.
Okay, I thought somebody said something. Okay, so the social model says that the person doesn't have a disability, but they are instead disabled by a society that excludes their needs. And as part of a training that I had at work, they showed us this YouTube video, which I will be linking. And it basically kind of flips the scripts and describes like a world created specifically by and for only wheelchair users. So all the ceilings were built at about 7 feet and the doors are at 5 feet. So everything is at a lower level. And whenever able-bodied people began moving into this town, they would constantly hit their head, or they had a lot of back problems from like crouching, trying to get through those doors. And their solution was to just give them hats and back braces to kind of deal with that, rather than like accommodating them into their society. So I thought that was like really, it was a good perspective. So I know I'm talking really fast. There's a lot to cover, so yeah. Okay, so the law. So are we required by law for your product or your web app to be accessible? And basically, yes. There have been many laws born to protect and accommodate those living with a disability. For example, wheelchair ramps were as a result of the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which came around in 1990. And that is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on disabilities, including mental and physical. And it doesn't have a strong digital section because it's so old. Like 1990, they didn't have these problems then. And there's a strong debate if the web is considered a public space. So, does this apply to, the web? But recently, it has become more accepted as a public space according to court rulings and non-compliance lawsuits. And those can, so if your website is not accessible, you can get sued. Like this man sued Domino's because their pizza tracker wasn't accessible just with the keyboard, and he won and he got paid. So yeah, and then Section 508 was a law enacted in 1986, but it wasn't really enforced until 1998. Yeah, okay, so it's an amendment to the Rehabilitation Act. And oh man, I messed up my slide. I'm sorry. I'll describe this. So that requires all technology developed for the federal government to be accessible to those with disabilities. So anything like technology, like software or web apps, computers, or even digital documents, if it's for the use by the government, it has to be accessible and compliant. And so the WCAG, I forget the acronym, I'm sorry. It's a okay, I'll mention it later, I'm sorry. But those are 3 levels of conformance that were amended to Section 508 in 2016, just to keep up with, all the changes, and everything is digital now. So they needed to get with the times. And yeah, so that's a huge topic. All the levels of conformance and everything you have to hit. And I'll leave that checklist and the guidelines as a resource, because we don't have time to go through all of it right now. So, okay, so where do we begin when you're starting a project, or I guess even getting into a project that's already ongoing and you want to, make it a little bit more accessible? So just how do we make sure we're accommodating all users of all ability? So we should begin at the beginning. It's very common to leave accessibility to the very end, just run an audit and just fix the things that it says is wrong and just call it a day. But these fixes sometimes compromise the design. And I mean, depending on the changes can really alter everything. So it's best to start at the beginning, like including users with different abilities in your user research whenever you're going through that process, including accessibility concerns in your personas or your user stories. So just whatever persona you have, just maybe give them a vision problem or or any kind. I'll describe some more of the more popular, I guess, disabilities. Testing your product with assistive technologies like screen readers, just make sure that it'll all go, in order. And watching users navigate your product using their preferred assistive technologies. And also not restricting your mobile app design to only one way, because, depending on who flips it or what orientation they need. So to give more detail to some of these tips, I wanted to expand on the most common kind of disability, including what considerations to take when keeping these things in mind. I feel like it really helps to empathize with the users. So I think the most, popular one I relate to is vision impairments, which ranges from low vision to just partial sight or complete blindness, tunnel vision, and clouded vision. Also color blindness, which is when somebody has difficulty distinguishing between colors such as red and green or yellow and blue, or can't see any color at all. And one of the assistive technologies that people with vision impairments use are screen readers, and it's a software that reads out everything on your screen, and also just using the keyboard to access everything to get the screen reader moving, and also refreshable braille. And there are some Google Chrome tools to check for these kinds of things, like if you want to check a certain kind of color blindness condition. I think this one is a chromatopsia, I'm not sure, but you could just take your website and then run this Chrome extension, and it'll tell you how somebody with that condition will see your website. So keeping that in mind, make sure all content is accessible using a keyboard. I know hover states are tricky. Also, I know those flippable cards are like really popular, but just making sure that whenever somebody goes through it using only a keyboard, that they're able to see all your content, or maybe even avoid doing that if possible. And also using a combination of color, text, and graphics to convey information instead of just color. Because sometimes, if you have a graph and you're just saying, oh, look at the green, and somebody can't see the green, then it's not going to make any sense. Also, using consistent components. Buttons should look similar throughout your entire app or your website, just to help with predictability if somebody has trouble with vision. Also designing focus states, so you can see where you're at if you're using the keyboard. And also follow a logical layout. I know we do like to get crazy and make everything creative and cool, but sometimes you have to think about zooming in and how everything's going to look depending on what you're considering. And there's a popular, I guess, exercise whenever it comes to accessibility trainings is to just go to a website and just search for something, a scrunchie, and just try to add it and go through the entire process of buying something using only your keyboard. So just if you get there, and I don't have time to do a demo, but if you just go to any site, just go to tab until you get to the search, type scrunchie, and just keep going until you're able to have that scrunchie in the cart and try to complete the payment. And sometimes it's really hard, and websites don't let you do that, which is excluding a huge group of people, and is bad for business. Okay, so another one is physical disabilities, also called motor disabilities. And this is weakness or limitations in the muscles, conditions like arthritis, amputations, or muscular dystrophy, also tremor and spasms. And some of the assistive technologies used by people with these disabilities are, there's special a mouse or keyboard designed for ergonomics. There's head pointers or mouth sticks. These are really cool. I couldn't include pictures, but I mean, there's a lot of devices that you can like control your screen using like switches or even blowing on into a device, or even eye tracking software and voice recognition. So for this one, just keep in mind designing large clickable areas, whether it's mobile or it's even desktop, just, not because if you're having trouble with the mouse, maybe, the tremors, it would be really easy to click something else. Also giving enough time to complete tasks. I don't know, I can't think of a scenario where there's times, but maybe sometimes CAPTCHAs, they kind of like hurry you up. And also provide keyboard support. I bolded this one because a lot of them are overlap. Like a lot of the tips kind of help people with all of these at once. So that's good. And another disability that I feel like I haven't heard that much of, I think, I hear mostly like ear visual, is cognitive disability. So anything that causes difficulty remembering or concentrating or making decisions, like ADHD, any learning disabilities and seizures. So I guess a lot of the assistive technologies for this is sometimes keeping focus. So some people use text-to-speech software to hear information while they're reading it, just to, I guess, help with, absorbing information. And also the other way, captions to read information while hearing it. And tools that resize text and or customize colors to assist with reading, and using grammar and spelling tools to support writing. So for this one, it's important to use meaningful link names so they're easy to understand. I think this one goes for, I guess, just whenever you're going through your design process anyway, but like submit requests versus submit. If you are using, and I bold that because, if you are using just your keyboard or you're using a device, if your buttons are named kind of vague, it's really easy to go to the wrong place and then to have to go back. It's just not a good experience. And also avoid jargon and write clear, concise sentences. There's usually a target reading level that you should target just to make sure it's understandable. There's an app called Hemingway app that kind of helps you with making your text a little more understandable. I think when you're very knowledgeable about something, you kind of go off, and sometimes not everybody understands. So again, give enough time to complete tasks. CAPTCHAs, those are I don't know what the solution for CAPTCHAs are, but I mean, CAPTCHAs can get really confusing, when they have like, they tell you to hit all the boats and then there's like a little chunk of boat. So I guess just making those a little bit easier. I know that they're necessary sometimes, but I don't know what an alternative is for CAPTCHAs, but also including ability to pause or turn off audio, blinking or flickering content. That's really distracting. And sometimes I know carousels just keep going, and you can't turn it off, and it is distracting. So I did have like a small activity to complete CAPTCHA while very sleepy or distracted. I know that when I mentioned the situational and permanent disabilities, sometimes cognitive issues come about when you're very sleepy or, under the influence of something or just distracted. So that's just like a way to get in their shoes. And then auditory disabilities, that includes partial hearing loss and complete deafness. And I know closed captioning is pretty popular. Like I use it, even though I can hear. So I think it's really helpful for me for concentrating. I know a lot of people have mixed opinions, but also the head pointers or the mouse sticks, switches, and also voice recognition and eye tracking and other hands-free approaches to navigate. So for do's for that is add captions to video or audio content like transcripts if you're going to have like a big audio section. If the main interaction is with voice, like an Alexa type thing, design additional ways to complete those tasks. And again, avoid jargon and write clear, concise sentences. And I did include an activity to navigate YouTube with the volume off. Some videos, like the captions are just, I mean, sometimes they're not even there, I think. I've come across that, but yeah, that's that on that. Okay, so the goal is to make our content more usable for everybody. And I included this graphic that kind of summarizes the idea that everybody benefits if you take the extra time to include all these different abilities and disabilities in your design process. So you can see the guy is shoveling the steps, but if he started shoveling the ramp first, then everybody could get in. But if he's starting on the steps, then the wheelchair user has to wait until he finishes that and then the ramp. So basically everybody will benefit. I didn't include this, but there's a thing called the curb cut effect, where it's basically saying that, you know, the intended purpose, sometimes other people benefit. Like the curb cuts, they were designed for wheelchair users, but moms with strollers or bicyclists and people carrying like luggage all benefited from, you know, the curb cuts on the sidewalk. And that wasn't even the intended purpose. It was only for wheelchair users, but you know, everybody ended up benefiting. So yeah, that's all I have. I know I talk like super fast, but if you want to learn more, there's the whole topic of semantic HTML, which is very important for screen readers to go through all that content. There are certain structures that you have to follow, or else the screen reader will just go all, or it'll get confused, or it'll be confusing for somebody to listen to it. The WCAG 3 levels, I know usually it's AA that you have to be compliant. I think in general, the AAA is like amazing, but that one's a little bit harder. And also Mac, if you have a Mac, there is a voiceover tool. I forget what it's called, but it comes with the laptop. I think the Microsoft one is paid, so I've never tried that, but you can use that to kind of use your computer with only the voiceover, the screen reader, if you want to like get into experiencing that. And also reading over the material design or the iOS accessibility guidelines. And there's also a lot of Chrome extensions that kind of like the color contrast checkers or the different color blindness conditions that I showed. And there's also the Hemingway app that kind of looks at your writing and tells you like if it's what reading level it is. If it's too complicated, you should like tone it down a little bit. But that's all I have. Anybody has any questions? But I guess let me say bye first. This is where you can find me. This is my LinkedIn. I also included my Instagram, even though I don't really use it that much, but you can also message me on the Hexagon Houston Slack. I keep that open pretty much all the time. But okay, that's all. Any questions? I know that was a lot.
And feel free to come off mute and ask your question, or if you'd prefer to put it in the chat, we will get it over to Nydia.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. This was super informative. I'm taking the Google UX course right now. And yesterday was the day I spent like the whole day learning about this, but I guess it's really easy for Google to say like, do these thousands and thousands of things because they have a ton of UX designers and a ton of money. So coming from, I've been an interior designer for 7 years for large corporate and hospitality projects. And when I mean, for physical things like ramps and elevators and stuff like that, we see money signs. I guess I just wanted to know how that translates into the engineering of a website, like when maybe you're not as established and you maybe have one designer, two designers. But at what point do you kind of have to do, not, I don't want to say the bare minimum, but what you, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand your question, and unfortunately, and I guess this also goes into the problem of companies that really don't even value like UX design. There are actual job titles just for this accessibility topic, but usually because of money and resources, it usually falls on whoever will take it. Like at my company, the developers, the ones that actually program, just kind of handle it. So there's no considerations when starting the design at all. And so that's kind of what the presentation was about, to like start at the beginning. But sometimes you can't do that because of resources. And I've ran into that problem too. But I guess to answer maybe your question, those three standards that I mentioned, the WCAG, like at my work, we have to meet AA. So whenever we're done with a project, if it meets that, I guess technically that is the bare minimum, but that's because of time, it's usually how it goes. I don't know if anybody else has an experience with that, because I've only really worried about this at my current job, and my past one, I never really even had to think about this, which is scary looking back at it.
No, that's really helpful.
Yeah, for all the web design projects I work on, in our contract, we say we follow WCAG WCAG standards. So within the design, right, we're going to make sure that all of our forms have labels, that any text that is supposed to be readable is safe before it goes into production. So for the designers, we're ensuring that people can read the colors and any overlays, but a lot of the accessibility work is in the developer's hand, and they have a metric of getting 90% in Google Lighthouse, which is not saying much. Google Lighthouse, if you do an inspector run, they don't actually catch the most important accessibility requirements that a screen reader would need. So I think it's, oh man, I feel like there's so much to learn for everyone, and it's becoming an industry standard. And that's my question, Nydia. When you're doing your research, were you seeing a trend of like more standards being developed, or this, I don't know, creating a commonality of we have to build everything ally first?
Like research for this presentation, or for like my job?
Yeah, or in general, are you seeing, can we expect an accessible future?
I mean, I think so, because that Microsoft inclusive design resource, I think they're really pushing to start considering these, and not even just disabilities, but also like biases and like diversity and all that, AI stuff, and all those problems. I don't know, but they're like considering all of that, not just disabilities. I mean, I was looking for articles about this, so people did care, but I don't really know in terms of like individual companies, if they're really starting to prioritize this topic. I know sometimes we're still even fighting to make design a priority, so I don't know.
Hi, Nydia. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Hi. So thank you so much for the information. That was definitely a topic that a lot of us kind of just glaze over, kind of like out of sight, out of mind thing if it's not affecting you. But I have a question. I know you mentioned that the Microsoft Inclusive Toolkit visualizes disability and in a spectrum, and that you mentioned that federal like websites or anything that's done for like the federal government needs to meet certain disability criteria. Now, is there a particular criteria that they cater to? Is that something that you found in your research, or is it like, do they focus on the main ones that we usually are quick to think about, like physical, visual, but like, I know you mentioned some cognitive, like what is their criteria?
So I think, I wish I could remember what the acronym is for the WCAG Standards, which is what you have to meet for Section 508 for the federal government compliance. There are guidelines for the AA standard that you have to meet to pass, to be compliant, to not be, violating anything. And there's like a list of things that, like small things, kind of like the keyboard accessible. So it kind of encompasses all kinds of disabilities with that will use these features, like keyboard accessibility. I know that one is useful for, basically all the ones that I covered. So I'm not really sure if like that graphic, I think that one's just kind of like a perspective thing for the compliance. I don't think they consider that. It's just kind of like a list of like the keyboard thing, or any of the other ones. Like, I'm like blanking, I'm sorry. But yeah, I've included that checklist on the resources if anybody wants to look at it.
Okay, of course. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. That was a great information and a great resource.
I had one more question. So until I get used to UX, I'm gonna reference back to interiors, but so obviously, in order to open a space, you have inspectors come in, and you can't launch, or you can't open your space until it's approved and it's ADA compliant. Who are the people checking these websites? Or is it at this point just we are doing this so we don't get sued if someone happens to look at our website? Are there people checking it? Or for larger companies, do you have to go through any sort of like permit process before you launch?
Okay, so I'm not sure about other bigger companies that have like, a lot more resources to pay more attention to this, or that have websites that have more traffic. For my company, I feel like I'm calling them out, but we do run, we have a special tool that we run and make sure it's, passing. And that's usually enough to, launch the app or the website. So I'm not sure. I think I read, it's basically, somebody calls and complains, and that's how you find out. I mean,
So
it's
testing at this point. It's not necessarily like someone's like giving you a ticket or something unless someone complains.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It depends on the industry, though, I will say.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure bigger companies
I work
have more eyes on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I have a lot of real estate clients, and they have a lot more stricter accessibility and equity guidelines that they have to follow. So, and that follows through on their website. So for housing, there is a lot of laws related to accessible spacing, and that carries over into their digital spaces as well. So certain industries certain sectors may follow it a little bit differently. Meredith, I'm gonna let you.
Well, there's one question in the chat that we've skipped over, and I don't want to miss it. So I keep unmuting to try to interject it, but I don't want to cut you off either. Linda is asking if there's a difference in how this applies to mobile apps versus websites.
I don't think so. Whenever I was doing my research, even for work, a lot of the guidelines are basically the same, like the color contrast or font sizes, I guess when it is smaller, or tap targets whenever, I think iOS, I think there's like a set, I forget the number, I think it's at 40, I don't know, but no, it's basically the same. there might be some small specific cases that, you know, are only specific to mobile, but for the most part, it's basically like almost the same kind of considerations.
I would think that a difference might be more in the creation side of things, because you don't have the ability to have all of the Chrome extensions to check everything along the way. But
yeah. And well, if you're designing for mobile, I mean, sometimes, well, a lot of times you have to go responsive. So, you know, you can't do hover states, and that's already a thing because you can't do that on mobile. So there are some things like that. I mean, I can't name them all, like I can't think of them, but there's just some small like additional things. Like I wouldn't say it's completely different from what you would do for web, but I think it's just more.
okay, Clarice added a question. If you want to design a project to be a tool for accessibility as the priority instead of as an afterthought, how would you start? Example, a drawing app that's voice controlled for motor disabilities.
Well, I would start with like watching users draw. I mean, what was it? A draw? Somebody with a motor disability, especially speaking to them to see what kind of problems they run into, or what they would like fixed. I think that's how I would start.
I know.
The question, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you're trying to prioritize starting from scratch with this as a priority instead of an afterthought, are there any tips? So I think.
Oh, okay, yeah, you definitely talk to, you know, the source. Heavy on the user research.
One thing that's been a challenge for me with user research is we use user testing as our platform for unmoderated tests, and their platform is not usable by screen readers, I guess. So even to be able to screen for participants who do have to use assistive technology to make sure that it is usable for them, there's no way for us to get that participant group at all. So hopefully these platforms that enable user research will make improvements as well to make it more accessible for us to test accessibility.
Yeah, because it's hard to find all these different kinds of people with these devices, and it's expensive, especially if research isn't even prioritized to begin with. So
Yeah, research first for everything, especially if there's a certain target audience that has special needs where there's not a lot of data available.
Any additional questions for Nydia?
Nydia, maybe you can give us some insight. I know since you're on the developer designer kind of crevice there, is there considerations that you've learned as a developer that you incorporate into your design work, or I don't know, is there just any insight that you can give us on how designing for accessibility has affected your practice? Hot tips. I'm looking for hot tips.
well, I guess because I already know a lot about HTML, I am careful about headings and structures, because I know that screen readers will follow an order. So things like that. Also, I know I keep mentioning it, but like the keyboard, like interactions, like making sure that like hover states or tooltips or anything like that can be accessed on the keyboard.
Hold on.
I don't
Let's
know.
go back to the headers, because I had to build this website that was supposed to be accessible first, but I wasn't provided enough tools to test. And I was building it. I'm not a developer. So I kept getting errors. So you have to have your headings in order, right? So in HTML, you have 1 through 6, headers 1 through 6. And I would get these errors of, well, you have 2 H4s. And so how do you just have to have like text blocks that have the same visual H4? Like I want visually the text to be like 36 pixels, but it can't be an actual header text. Does that make any sense?
It does, because yeah, if you have to use, I think it depends on if you have like a container that has a heading 1, then everything kind of has to follow the order. But you can use H4 and then use CSS to make it whatever size you want. You can say the H4 on this page, make it 12. So the
But you can
H4
only
could
have
be
like one of each on the page, though.
no, you can have multiple. Like
Hmm.
if you have like a news site, all those little blocks would be like a header too, and that should be fine, because as long as it's following, like if you look at a skeleton, it should all, like a tree view, it should all kind of make sense. And there's a way you can check it. I can try to find that tool for you, but yeah, no, you should be able to, because yeah, you would need more depending on like especially like that news site example, you would need
Yeah.
to use it multiple times.
Yeah.
And
I
you
think
can't
that's
just use anything. Yeah.
I think that's what's hard is I understand visually how to have good hierarchy, but then when you get into the HTML side, I'm like, ooh, do I use just normal text or a header? So
Yeah, it's a whole, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot for one person to do, for
stick
sure.
to UX people and don't code.
Yeah.
Janelli is aggressively shaking her head.
Yeah, it's not as fun.
Thank you.
Cool. I'm going to post links again in the chat here. And hopefully they will hyperlink, at least one hyperlinked. Janelli has done a really great job of recapping all of our events on Notion for us. So check that Notion link tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have the recording and Nydia's resources and slides up there for you to reference. The second link is for our post-event survey. So we survey after every event. Hopefully you're not tired of it, but it really does help us know how we can best create what you want to get from Hexagon. And then the last link there is just to join us on Slack if you're not already. Nydia is there and can continue answering questions over there on Slack, and we'd love to have you be part of the conversation. So anything else before we wrap up for the evening?
Thank you so much for the information, Nydia. I really appreciated introduction to this issue.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining, and I hope to see you in 2 Thursdays. Your homework is to go watch The Social Dilemma and then talk about it with us in 2 weeks. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Nydia.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.